War Crimes Tribunal on Japan's military sexual slavery delivered its judgment in 2001 on events that happened during World War II. Like all such tribunals, it had no powers to sanction or punish, but found criminal culpability in those responsible, including the long-dead wartime emperor, for forcing women into the sexual slavery of soldiers of the Japanese Imperial Army during the war. The women then surviving, and history itself, gained immense benefit from the judgment. The Russell Tribunal, formed by philosopher Lord Bertrand Russell and others in 1966, inquired into alleged criminality by the United States of America in the then current Vietnam War, acting with urgency in the hope that its evidence-based findings might affect the conduct of the war. In each case, those tribunal decisions are the only assessments of culpability reached at evidence-based processes. Failures by nations or international bodies to deal with such questions as people's tribunals usually answer are normally or always a reflection of concerns, or worse, unstated and hidden, about the consequences of confronting a powerful state by public examination of what to that powerful state may be a sensitive issue. Now, it is very unlikely, effectively impossible, for the allegations levelled against the PRC to be tested before any formal court such as the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice, or to be dealt with by any other national or international public evidence-based process. And that is why this tribunal was formed and why it has acted urgently, at speed, to have these hearings, the hearings in September, and to deliver judgment in December, so that its judgment, whatever is found, may assist in decisions that have to be made by any who interact with the PRC for as long as these allegations continue to be made. The tribunal has made clear from the start that if any official body, national or international, were to organize a public evidence-based assessment of the allegations, there would have been no need for the tribunal to be established or for it to continue with its work. People's tribunals have no formal power, and their jurisdiction, if needed at all, is rooted in the obvious right of citizens to fill gaps or voids in knowledge left by governments and international bodies and courts. This right has been exercised in this case, as already explained, pursuant to a mandate from the World Uyghur Congress. People's tribunals can help with the citizen's right to know what the citizen needs to know to perform personal and public duties. They always allow testimonies of those said to have suffered to be heard publicly. Thus, they reflect both a right to know and a right to tell. They serve to create a permanent body of evidence and a record, if found, of crimes perpetrated. Their judgments reach conclusions of fact and law by first establishing facts and then applying the known law. Their judgments are for others, governments, institutions, corporations, and individuals, to act on if they choose, as they interact with the country or body involved, in this case, the PRC. Allegations made against the PRC are grave. To start with, on the face of the witness statements, the evidence, of course, yet to be tested and assessed, on the face of those statements, breaches are revealed of Articles 1 to 13 inclusive, 18, 19, 23, 24, 26, and 27 of the 1948 Declaration of Human Rights. Although not binding in effect, such breaches are reflected in different ways in international humanitarian law. Crimes against humanity and genocide, which are crimes under international humanitarian law, are obviously as serious as crimes can be, and as similar to each other in some ways, but materially different in one respect, namely, the contracting parties to the Genocide Convention undertake to prevent and to punish genocide. The International Court of Justice, world's highest court, has made clear that any contracting party to that convention must employ all available means reasonably available to them the instant it learns or should have learned that there is a serious risk that genocide may occur. No parallel covenant-based imperative exists for crimes against humanity, but it is a fundamental principle or norm of international law that states must prohibit, must not commit, and must prevent in some way and punish perpetrators of any such crime. Focusing on genocide can show precisely why people's tribunals can be necessary in a modern state. Several parliaments around the world and one government, the United States, have made pronouncements adverse to the PRC about genocide of the Uyghurs. But no contracting party to the convention has shown itself to be duty-bound or obliged to act in any way by honouring the Article 1 undertaking. Now, how can that be? How can there be no serious risk of genocide occurring sufficient to require a response to Article 1 when 3 or more parliaments and one government have said genocide is actually happening to the Uyghurs? Consider the United Kingdom, which acceded to the convention in 1970, 21 years after it entered into force. No government since, of any political colour, has justified action by reference to the Article 1 undertaking. In 1971, Sir Alec Douglas Hume, as Foreign Secretary, responded to a suggestion of action over an alleged genocide by arguing, first there must be an accusation, then it must be dealt with in the courts of the country concerned, then it must be dealt with under the auspices of the United Nations Court, but no such court has been set up. Therefore, accusations of genocide fall on barren ground. The present government's position is little different. However, times have changed, and the terms crimes against humanity and genocide have, at the initial instigation of lawyers and politicians who recognize the need to do everything to avoid the repetition of the horrors of 2 world wars, those terms have become common currency. Citizens around the world now use the terms and expect countries to act in accordance with the law concerning them. So it is a misfortune that the United Kingdom's government, and perhaps many others, finds itself by combination of policy and limitations of international judicial systems unable even to consider the duties it may have under the Genocide Convention, simply because there is no judge to say whether genocide is occurring. A requirement not to be found in the convention itself, but formulated within the United Kingdom. And the government cannot think that those who are not judges are incapable of deciding on evidence whether genocide is happening. Under the United Kingdom's legal system, a jury of randomly selected United Kingdom citizens could decide the issue if an individual were charged with genocide under a statute that makes genocide a national crime and that was passed into law 20 years ago. This particular misfortune of government serves to demonstrate that there is a gap or void to be filled if citizens are to have confidence that their government is fulfilling immensely important duties it has and must discharge on the citizens and on its own behalf. All members of the tribunal Counsel to the tribunal, Hamid Sabi, head of research, Aldo Zamit Border, and others work entirely pro bono, without benefit of any kind. No one working for the tribunal is permitted to make any financial contribution to the tribunal. No one in the tribunal has any particular interest in the Uyghurs or other Muslims in the PRC or in the PRC itself, beyond the interest that they may have for others around the world said to have suffered injustice at the hands of the state. Thus, no one in the tribunal has any interest in the tribunal's judgment beyond ensuring that it is correct and just. The 7 other members who formed the tribunal with Mr. Vetch and me were recruited not from a single profession or discipline, but to ensure the judgment to be reached will benefit from diverse decision-making experience of a diverse group of citizens. The tribunal may, without offence, be thought to be at least as qualified as the hypothetical random jury to deal with the evidence to be received and the law dealing with genocide, crimes against humanity, and possibly other crimes. Funds are, of course, required for hire of this venue, witness travel, interpreters, translators, and at very modest rates, junior researchers, the chief operating officer, and one lawyer for what they do. Funding came initially from the World Uyghur Congress, but the donor base has expanded considerably since, including by crowdfunding. The tribunal website reveals the range, although not the identities of all financial contributors, including by a moving account of a generous financial support given discreetly by the late Akil Nurani, a young lawyer in training to become a barrister. The tribunal has no rules of procedure and will operate by free evaluation of evidence, unrestricted by technical rules on admissibility. It recognizes the need to assess evidence according to its proximity to subject matter, direct first-hand evidence of events at first-hand sight, ranking above documentary or hearsay evidence. There will be witnesses giving evidence of facts, most often of things that happened to them personally, sometimes of things told to them by others. There will be experts giving opinions on various matters. For all witnesses, their witness statements or expert reports will have been read and confirmed in advance as accurate or corrected and will stand as their evidence. Counsel may ask questions of detail or additional questions, and then the panel members will ask questions. However, any witness's evidence is in combination the witness statement, which will be available on the website, together with answers to questions given here. For some witnesses, most likely expert witnesses, the time allowed for questioning in these hearings may mean that more will be required of them, and that can be allowed for by further written statements or reports added and posted to the website before September, or by the witnesses returning in September. This process has to be fast-paced and dynamic, because the subject matter is urgent. And if the allegations are to any substantial extent accurate, then achieving a properly researched and considered judgment may serve the interests of a very large number of people. People's tribunals do not need to move at the speed of international courts, and this one won't. Absent the provision of Uyghur English simultaneous interpreters, where witnesses speak in Uyghur language, all relevant interpretation will be consecutive. Self-evidently, this slows questioning. With the witness statements standing as evidence, an oral summary of the witness statement will be given by counsel or a member of counsel's team at the start of the witness's evidence with questions to follow. And for best use of time and for certainty of translation, questions will necessarily be concise, it being understood that no discourtesy is intended by brevity or even by seeming curtness of any question. For witnesses, and there are several, who have previously given detailed accounts on television and books, on radio stations, of the matters of which they will speak to the tribunal, the following. The PRC has from time to time attacked the evidence or personality of such witnesses. Counsel will raise the subject of attack, where possible, with those witnesses. Restriction on travel into this country as a result of COVID, together with some UK visa requirements for those willing to come to London to give evidence, have made the logistics of hearing 35 or so witnesses at this hearing extremely difficult. The result is that we will have a number of witnesses appearing by video from a number of different countries, speaking in what may to us unfamiliar languages, with interpreters in different jurisdictions, all in different time zones. And in these circumstances, it is, of course, possible that things may not always go according to plan, and it's hoped that will be understood. Expert witnesses, speaking in English, may express opinions based on their expertise, but will not be invited to give opinions on the final mixed factual legal issues that are for the tribunal alone, and any opinions on those issues that are expressed will be disregarded. It is important for the tribunal to have best evidence, including evidence of the PRC's position in respect of the allegations made. The tribunal must and will do all it can to hear the other side. It has written on several occasions to the PRC's embassy in London, inviting the PRC to contribute to these proceedings. To date, the embassy has neither acknowledged nor replied to letters sent. The tribunal has also written to governments believed to have valuable evidence, whether favourable or unfavourable to the PRC. For example, any country with diplomatic presence in the PRC is bound to receive reporting from embassies and consulates that will include evidence-based accounts of what is known as PRC intention towards Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and others. The tribunal recognises how there may be reasons for keeping diplomatic reporting confidential. However, where a country may be committing such crimes as are alleged against the PRC, and where this tribunal is the only body conducting public evidence-based hearings, it might be thought there was a broad duty to the world's citizens to be forthcoming with such evidence. The United States of America, Japan, Australia, and the United Kingdom have all been asked to provide evidence. All have declined to assist or have failed to respond, except for one country, pointing us to very well-known open source material. Some weeks ago, the PRC announced the imposition of sanctions on certain individuals and organizations, including this tribunal. The basis for these sanctions in law of the PRC itself is unclear, as is their scope, but they have not been without effect. Two highly respected experts in law were willing to advise the tribunal on relevant law. That is no longer possible, wholly as a result of sanctions. One witness has withdrawn, similarly, because of sanctions. Plans to have a woman counsel ask questions of women witnesses, if and whenever desirable, have also been made impossible as a result of sanctions. No criticism of any kind is made of those whose ability to help the tribunal was affected by sanctions. Their reasoning was faultless and completely understood. The tribunal has not felt it appropriate since announcement of sanctions to invite anyone else into what is said to be a sanctioned environment, other than for a few people doing administrative tasks or helping with arrangements at these hearings. Anyone volunteering to help now at a more senior level, knowing of the sanctions, might be impugned, fairly or not, as not being neutral towards the PRC. Alternative arrangements to deal with the consequences of sanctions have been made and will be announced when appropriate. On hearing of the sanctions, the tribunal explained by immediate press release that the sanctions would not affect the work of the tribunal, would not be held against the PRC in reaching its judgment. And we went on to say, we continue to hope that the PRC will respond to our invitations to cooperate with the tribunal and provide evidence to help the tribunal in its work. And that remains the tribunal's position. Counsel to the tribunal and his team are not, in any sense, presenting a case or arguing in support of the allegations that have been made. Their function has been to locate, make available, and present a balanced range of evidence from which the tribunal will be able to assess the allegations fairly, starting with no assumptions or presumptions of any kind. Counsel will be able to identify what legal issues may arise, but given that they are part of the tribunal, they will not be invited to advise the tribunal on the law in the way that the independent experts might have done. The break-in proceedings from June until September is in part a logistic necessity, but it also brings advantages to a dynamic process. First, evidence broadcast from the June hearings, these June hearings, may serve to stimulate others to provide further evidence, whether supportive of the allegations or otherwise, something the tribunal encourages, and that is facilitated by the submit evidence item on the tribunal's webpage. Second, expert evidence given in these June hearings can be subject to correction or challenge in the September hearings, again via the website or by direct approach to the tribunal's counsel. More will be said about these things at the end of Monday's hearing. Pre-reading by the tribunal members of witness statements and of other material suggests that many issues may automatically arise in the mind as evidence is given, including whether certain treaties and laws are now too narrowly or too broadly drafted, whether the definition of genocide in particular should be expanded, whether the Declaration of Human Rights is truly universal, and other such things. A People's Tribunal can allow these or similar issues to be raised and discussed. They may have value for parts of the tribunal's work, but the tribunal cannot and will not overreach the jurisdiction it has assumed. Likening itself where possible to a jury, it may well make no recommendations in its judgment and will confine itself to reaching conclusions of fact and law, the law as it is, when satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that it is right to do so, and only on the basis of evidence received. Mr. Savage.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the tribunal, and good morning to all. My name is Hamid Sabi, and together with my colleagues, Dr. Zainab Porda and R.F. Abraham, we act as counsel to the tribunal. Dr. Zainab Porda will explain the efforts of our research team in collection of evidence and the database of the tribunal, while Mr. Abraham will outline the legal issues that may arise for consideration by the tribunal. Counsel's remit has been to obtain evidence from all available sources in connection with mounting allegations relating to political authorities, Kazakhs, and other social minorities in West China, and assess, evaluate, and present all that evidence to the tribunal. Counsel was assisted by a large research team in this endeavor. As the chairman mentioned, the council does not present a case for or against the PRC. Our duty is simply to present all the evidence relevant to the issue under consideration. As Dr. Zami Porda will report this morning to you, all the evidence collected and collated by the team, including those deemed to be repetitious or not relevant, are available to the tribunal members on the tribunal database. Apart from evidence publicly available, the team was assisted, amongst others, by evidence emanating from World Euler Congress and the Euler Transitional Justice Database, pursuant to its effort in collecting evidence and contacting witnesses. However, in order to ensure impartiality in the collection, a assessment and evaluation of evidence, the tribunal established its own independent evidence gathering assessment mechanism to collect evidence from all sides. The function was and remains independent of any organization. The council team has reviewed over 300 witness statements that were considered highly relevant and probative, and of those we have selected 40 witnesses, of whom 24 of them will be testifying during this session. Over 50 experts have been approached and studied. Their work was methodically assessed, and they were contacted by the team. Of these experts, 14 are testifying during these 4 days here. Again, as the chairman mentioned, the council further contacted governments of the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, and Australia, requesting evidence and explanation of allegations emanating from West China and those governments' policies in that respect. While the United Kingdom government has expressed general support in public for the tribunal's work, it has not offered any assistance. Both the United States and Australia in recent communications have indicated willingness to assist the tribunal. As and when any evidence becomes available, that evidence will be submitted to the tribunal. Council wrote on 4 occasions to the government of the People's Republic of China through their embassy in London, inviting the PRC to participate meaningfully in this process by introducing special counsel or an observer, as well as presenting evidence supporting its instance in relation to alleged incarceration of Uyghurs and other Turkic minorities in camps in West China. In fact, on 28 March 2021, PRC sanctioned this tribunal and its chairman. On 25th May, China denounced the tribunal as adopting illegal proceedings and called it a serious provocation to the 25 million of ethnic groups in Xinjiang. Other than that, the Council has not received any acknowledgement or response from the PRC. The members of the tribunal have been provided with copies of all these correspondence. I now ask my colleague, Dr. Zani Porter, to address you in connection with evidence gathering procedures of the Council team.
Thank you, Lead Counsel, Sir Geoffrey, distinguished members of the Tribunal. In the short intervention, I will outline the work of our research team and our work in the area of collection of evidence and investigations. Immediately upon its establishment, the Tribunal set up a research and investigations unit that was responsible for the collection and analysis of publicly available evidence from various sources. I headed that unit. Please allow me to share with you and give you a sense of the scale of the effort. The unit engaged over 25 researchers and also collaborated with the International Criminal and Humanitarian Law Clinic at the University of Laval. Over 8,000 research hours were spent analyzing, assessing, and evaluating evidence from reports of governments and international organizations, reports from non-governmental organizations, from the government of the People's Republic of China, and other sources connected with the PRC, from online sources, and various other sources. The Tribunal has also received detailed testimonies from fact witnesses and written evidence from leading experts around the world. Researchers working with the unit analyzed and reviewed hundreds of thousands of pieces of evidence. Our researchers had robust methodologies in place to impartially analyze and categorize any and all evidence received by the Tribunal or obtained on its own initiative, according to whether or not it was relevant and probative to the issue at hand. Researchers collected evidence irrespective of whether it appeared to be inculpatory or exculpatory. The tribunal categorized and inputted all of this evidence deemed to be of high or medium importance into an evidence database. We also kept a record of evidence deemed to be repetitious or non-relevant. The tribunal, from the available evidence, has catalogued and documented allegations of grievous abuses committed against the Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Turkic minorities in the Xinjiang region. The available evidence suggests acts such as mass surveillance and monitoring of the Muslim populations in the region, detention of millions of Uyghurs and other Turkic minorities in camps, treatment which may amount to torture or degrading treatment of detainees in these camps, separation of children from their parents, the denial of the right to practice their religion or speak their language, sterilization, forced labor, organ harvesting, disappearances, and in some cases, deaths. However, we have also documented evidence from the People's Republic of China that firmly denies that any such abuses have been or are being committed in the Xinjiang region. The position of the PRC is that its camps provide vocational training and are needed to fight extremism. From this perspective, the PRC has stated that it has always undertaken counterterrorism measures in accordance with the law. All of this evidence, including evidence of the allegations of abuses and evidence of the PRC's position on this matter, which was taken from public sources, has been made available to you, members of the panel. Finally, in order to promote greater transparency, and with a small number of exceptions specifically authorized by members of the panel, this evidence has also been made available and accessible to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ruda. The tribunal, as explained, has before it a large body of evidence, both inculpatory and exculpatory, in respect of the allegations emanating from Xinjiang. The tribunal will make various factual findings in respect of those allegations and may then apply the relevant law to those facts to make legal findings. Counsel to the tribunal have provided several expert reports that consider the allegations emanating from Xinjiang to constitute violations of numerous provisions of international law. It is for the tribunal to determine whether that is the case, considering the evidence before it. The tribunal also has available to it, on request, treaties, jurisprudence, and legal commentary in relation to the relevant law. The relevant law is the international law that applies to the People's Republic of China as a state and/or individuals or organizations who are non-state operating within the PRC. That international law binds the PRC by virtue of either treaties the PRC has ratified or rules of customary international law which binds all states. Therefore, pursuant to these applicable treaties or customary international law obligations, the tribunal may consider the law relating to the following international crimes as relevant. First, the crime of genocide, by which is meant the commission of certain prohibited acts with an intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, racial, religious, or ethnic group as such. The prohibited acts of genocide are limited to 5, namely killings, causing serious bodily or mental harm, creating conditions of life calculated to destroy, forcibly transferring children from one protected group to another, or imposing measures intended to restrict births. The words as such denote that the prohibited acts must have been committed against one or more persons because such persons were members of the particular protected group and specifically because of their membership in that group. Second, the tribunal may consider the 11 underlying prohibited acts which constitute crimes against humanity. Those prohibited acts, if purposely committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population, could be found to constitute crimes against humanity. The acts include, but are not limited to, enslavement, torture, murder, apartheid, and/or persecution against an identifiable group on ethnic, religious, or cultural or other grounds. Third, the tribunal may consider the prohibition of torture as a self-standing international crime. Fourth, the tribunal may consider violations of international law relating to the prohibition of racial discrimination, segregation, and/or apartheid, whether by virtue of the application on the Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination or rules of customary international law. Fifth, the tribunal may consider violations of prohibitions relating to slavery as set out in the Slavery Conventions or rules of customary international law. In the event of any doubt, the PRC is bound by peremptory norms of customary international law that include the crimes I have mentioned: prohibition of genocide, crimes against humanity, racial discrimination, slavery, and torture. These obligations are owed to the international community as a whole. The PRC's compliance with these obligations is therefore the concern of all states as much as it is this tribunal's. The tribunal may also consider the alleged acts or omissions by agents, organs, or officials of the PRC or non-state actors to fall for consideration under the following international treaties by which China is also bound: the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The PRC is duty-bound under international law to respect, protect, and fulfill in good faith all of its obligations. Under these treaties and customary international law, the PRC must interpret, apply, or fulfill its obligations in line with international jurisprudence and guidance. As a minimum, the PRC must respect and ensure respect for the rights guaranteed under those treaties to all persons in its jurisdiction without discrimination. That entails not only refraining from any conduct that undermines the enjoyment of those rights, but also investigating all allegations of violations of those rights by state and non-state actors, and also providing effective remedies to individuals who suffer harm. When applying the relevant law and jurisprudence to the facts, the tribunal may consider the full extent of the duties to prohibit, prevent, and punish violations of international criminal law and international human rights law, as outlined in my submission. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, our first witness is Sadiq.
Can I make one point through you, Mr. Sadiq? Sadiq is a woman, and as I explained, the possibility of having women witnesses taken through their evidence by a woman member of your team was rendered impossible by reason of the sanctions. Where women witnesses may be giving issues of evidence about sensitive issues, they have been alerted to the fact that there may be a man asking them questions in the first place. Their attitude to that's being considered, and the tribunal will, in most cases, ask most of its questions through women. And I hope that meets what would be current norms for dealing with sensitive evidence through women witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, that will be considered. Can we call Sadiq to the stand?
Is this witness speaking through an interpreter or by sequential translation?
She will speak through interpreters.
Thank you. And you should identify the interpreter first, or translator, because she will be serving us in the case of many witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, Kolbiner Siddiq was a teacher in the camps. She was born in Urumqi, East Turkestan. She taught Chinese language at local 24 primary school for 28 years. On 28 February 2017, she was given a new assignment by the party committee office at Saibab District Education Bureau. She was assigned to teach national language, that is Han Chinese, to a bunch of illiterate in designated locations. She was then forced to sign documents swearing her to secrecy, and then she was sent next morning to the camps. She fought in 2 camps for almost a year. A men camp first and then a female camp. She's a direct witness to the camp system and can attest to many ill treatment taking place in those detention centers. She witnessed the extremely poor sanitary conditions, the overcrowded cells, the weekly medical examination, blood sampling, injections of unknown substances, interrogations, injuries sustained by the detainees. She was forced to request for early retirement, and to add injury to insult, she was forced to live with the Chinese relative designated by the party. She was able to get her passport in September 2019 and join her daughter in Netherlands. Ms. Kolbiner Siddiq, you were a teacher for 26 in schools in Urumqi when you were asked to go and teach to a bunch of illiterates in a camp, and you started the work on 1st March 2016. Can you briefly describe for the tribunal the conditions of the camp? Please remember that the tribunal members have read your rather extensive report and they are fully aware of it. But would you please briefly highlight the points in the first men's camp? Thank you.
Siz burun o'qituvchi bo'lgansiz. 2017 yılı kampda o'qituvchilik, majburiy o'qituvchilik bo'lgan. Shuning uchun tunji erkaklar lagerini qisqacha bizga tushuntirib bera olamsiz. Bizning qo'limizda bütün sizning bayonotlarınız bor. Shuning uchun o'zingiz shu qisqacha bizga tushuntirib bergan bo'lsangiz. Erlar lagerini.
Salam xanımlar, efendiler. Ben ceza lager şahidi Kolbiner Siddiq. Bu Uyghur Sud kollegiyasına bugünkü kıymetli guvalık 5 kurs berginiga köpten köp rahmet aytaman.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I am Kolbiner Siddiq. I am the camp witness, and I am honored to have this opportunity to give evidence in this People's Tribunal today. Thank you very much.
2017 yılı 3. aydan 9. aygacha Vatanimiz Sharq Turkiston Urumqi shahridagi Sanfango 5. kanit tog' ustiga qurilgan erlar kampasida majburiy Xitoy tili dars o'tishga evatildim.
I was sent to male camp in March 2017 into September 2017. The camp was called Sanfango, and it was located on the top of hill of the mountain.
Mana bu ekranda ko'rsatilgani Salfango 5-kanitdagi erlar kampisi. Bu erlar kampisi tog' ustida qurilgan bo'lib, atrofi egiz tomlar bilan qo'rshalgan, uning usti elektronlik simlar bilan o'ralgan, saqchi harbiylar qurolliq, intoyin qattiq qamal qilingan bir joy edi. Xuddi bu yerdagi harbiy saqchilar urushga tayyor turgandek shunday holat edi.
This is the camp where I taught. That was number 5 camp that located on the top of the hill. And the place was surrounded by the high voltage cables and barbed wires. And the place will give you a impression that the soldiers and the police are ready to fight.
Bu yerde tutqun qilingan erlar kameralar içi qarangu, ularning derzlari butunlay qalaylarga qo'yatlangan, ular quruq simot yotadi. Har kuniga bir talda Xitoy momisi va quruq shogirsi chatdilar.
People in the camp, these males, they were locked in the cell where there is no beddings. They slept on the concrete floor. They were given one steam bun and a watery soup.
Bu yerdagi Xitoy saqchilar tutqunlarni odam qatorida ko'makdi. Ular hattoki ota-ona sinflarga kirib chiqish jarayonidami ishlardan, temir ishlardan xuddi itga o'xshash o'milab chiqib kiradi. Ularning itga o'xshash o'ltirilishini, azoblanishini, qiyinchilikqa ilinishini ko'rib shulardan huzurlanib ham qo'sh bo'ladi.
The police, the guards in the camp, they didn't treat the male prisoners as human beings. They were treated less than a dog. They couldn't walk out the door in a normal way, but they have to crawl out and crawl in. They enjoyed watching them being humiliated, and their suffering was for them is their joy.
Her bir kamerada 40'dan 50'gacha tutqunlar yotadi. Hem bu yerde opti bir tuvalet olur. Her günlük 3 vaqt. Her qatımda 1 minutdan tuvaletga kirish ham yuz qo'lni yuvish vaqti beriladi.
In every cell there were about 40 to 50 inmates, and there was only one toilet, and they were given 1 minute to use the toilet, and every day only 3 times.
Bu yerdagi tutqunlarni her daim ders vaqtlarida, tushlik aram vaqtlarida, kechlarda chaqirib echkitib so'roq qiladi. Chunki birinchi qavat so'roqxona yarasida bo'lg'achqa sinf intoyin yaqin. Bular chiqib yarim soatgacha bularning intoyin qiynalgandagi azob ovozlari butun binoga angladi, binoni zilzila keltirdi.
During the time when there was no lessons, they were taken up for questioning. The interrogation facility was in the basement and not far from the class. And half an hour after they were taken there, we could hear the screams, the horror, what is happening to them.
Bu kampdagi erlar cho'ch soqollar butunlay tushiritilgan, ustiga bir tutash erlarning ish kiyimlari kiygan, uning ustida seriq jilitning ustida nomer besig'liq. Shu nomerdan bularning bu tutqunlarniki 7-8 mingdan ortiq ekanligini bilgili bo'ldi. Ular har kuni har xil qiyin qisloqlarga, zo'rliqlarga, depsanchiliklarga, osh yalang'ochlarga bardoshib berib yashaydi. Ularning chiroyida qandidor yo'q, kuchmoqdir qat'iy yo'q edi.
The male prisoners, they wore the camp uniform and then a gray like pajamas, and then orange or yellow color vest, and the numbers was printed on the vest. And from the numbers, I would believe it was up to 8,000. Up to 8,000 inmates were locked up in that facility, and they had to endure all the humiliation and sufferings.
Ben bu erler kampında 3. ayının 1'den 8. ayının 28'gacha 6 ay turdim. Bu jarayonda bu kampdagi tutqunlar haqiqatan bu juyinib baxmidi, muncha kirib baxmidi, ularning bütün kiyimlari, badallari ishlab ketgan edi.
I was there from March to the 28th of August. They never had an opportunity to have shower, and therefore they developed lice and their clothes was full of lies in the end.
Thank you. You were then spent 2 days in your normal school and again assigned to another camp. Can you also briefly provide the tribunal with the details of the second camp, which was a female camp?
Bir yerden çıkıp siz çıkın evimiz kullandığım gibi yeni bir lagerga okuyuculukta edebilirsiniz. Şu yeni bir lager ne kısaca yani kısaca söylemek. Ben 2017 yılı 9. ayının 1'den başlap şu vatımız Şərq Türkistan Ürüm şəhəri Toğuqdaki kız ayallar lagerda yani mecburi ders üç etildi. Mana bu Toğuq'a sığınılan 6 qavatlı bina, balkonsuz bina. I was then in September sent to this camp called in Togon. Here is the camp that you can see. That's a female camp.
Bu kız ayollar kampısı mı binanın teşimi intayın qattiq qo'rshalgan, yana o'xshashlar elektronik simlar bilan o'ralgan, bina ichi, teshi, qo'ri hamma joyda saqchi, harbiylar, qurolliq intayın qamal qilingan 6 qavatli bino edi.
This was a 6-story building and it was secured, layers of security outside and inside. It was also barbed wired and high voltage cable. And so from inside, it's also very secure.
Bu joy qamal qilingan qiz ayollar mı 9 mingdan ortiq, hatta 10 mingga yaqin, 90% yuqori 18 yoshdan 40 yoshlar chamasidagi qizlar edi.
I believe there were over 9,000, perhaps 10,000 female inmates were interned in this facility. Over 90% of women were aged 18 to 40 years old.
Bu binanın her bir qavatiga birden sınıf o'rlashtirilgan. Her bir sınıfga 300 dan o'quvchi botidi. Ularning her bir kamerada o'xshashlar 40 dan 50 kishi qiz ayollar yotadi.
So in this building, in each floor, there was one classroom that could hold over 300 so-called students. And in the cells, also over 40 were locked up in a cell.
Bu joydagi qiz ayollarning hammasining sochlari tushiritilgan. Ularning chiroyida qandidari yo'q. Ular har hafta dushanba kunida tug'maslik ukol urildi, dori berildi. Ularning dushanba kuni qon elinadi.
Similarly, the females in this camp also, in a very miserable situation, you can't see any blood flowing in their face, faint. And every Monday, they were given pill and injections and also extract blood. The pills and injections is to stop them from having children.
Bu qiz ayollar turayotgan kamerlarning ichi qorong'u, lekin bularning tuvaletlari qiz ayollar kamerning ichiga o'rnashtirilgan. Her kuni bular navbat bo'yicha ashuni to'kib, dijonlik qildik.
There is no toilet facilities inside the cell, so there was a bucket. So they had to use that bucket, and then someone has to take that bucket out once a day.
Bu joydagi ishonchli tunishimdan va saqchi kadrlardan bu joydagi qiz ayollarniki to'xtamasdan har kuni so'roq olib chiqadiganligi, so'roq jarayonida Xitoy saqchilarniki har xil shaklda dafsanchilik qilib, bosqinchilik qilib, hattoki o'tchi bosqinchilik qilishni angladim. Bosqinchilik qilishdan keyin yana Xitoy saqchilari qo'lidagi to'qaltaklar bilan shu qiz ayollarniki faqat yo'llarga, hatto jins yo'llarga tiqib, boshlarni xo'rlaydi va qiynaydiganligini anglab, men o'zimni bosolmay o'g'rab ketdim.
During my time there, I heard from a close acquaintance, police acquaintance, that every time these women were taken for interrogation, they were not only tortured but also raped, sometimes gang raped. That, as if that was not enough, the police also used electric rods and insert that into their vagina to make them suffer. And when I heard this, I was so devastated and I couldn't bear it.
Ben bu işlerini öz kulağım bilen anladım. Ana degan bu kız ayollarniki sınıflarga atanmış kirip çıkış, hatta ki kişi orundukta oturup kopuştaki hareketlerden ularning qanchalik azoblanganligi, o'ltasi qopamaydi, qopsa o'tiramaydi, hatta shundoq testda mengishdan juda qiynaladi. Ashlarning shu turqilaridan, shu ahvollardan, shu holatlardan ularning qanchalik qiynalganligini ko'rinib turadi.
I could see when they walked, when they came to the class, when they sit down, and when they stand up, they had difficulties to sit and stand up. And from the way they walked, I could see that they suffered and how what kind of ordeals that they have been through. I could see that from their appearance that they have been suffering.
Ben bu kız ayollar kampısına gelgen günler bu yerde toğmaslık doğrusu işçi bulgularılgan 18 yaştan 20 yaştan etrafındaki bir kızla adeti toxtumay bir yerim aygıcı ağırıp kansırap ölüp ketkenliğe şahit oldum.
I witnessed a young girl who was 18 to 20 years old, and due to the medication, not medication, the pill and the forced injection, she suffered bleeding for over a month, 1 month and a half. She didn't stop bleeding. In the end, she died because of that.
Ben öz gözümle görgen bu facialarni, bu zulümlerini, bu azaplarını, öz kulukumda ağlayan bu dehşetliklerini bir gün unutup kalgınım yok. Çünkü benim bir ayol kişi, benim kızım var, hiç kim bunda korluklar kalmasın.
The things that I have witnessed and I experienced, I cannot forget. Even for a day, I cannot forget. I am woman myself. I have daughter. I don't wish anyone to suffer like that.
Ben 2017 yılı 10. ayının ahırı bu kız ayollar kampısındaki 6 aylık dersini davamlaştıramayı özüm katlık ağırıp gidip doktorda estetik davalıştı mecbur oldum. Sonra bu kız ayollar kampısındaki dersi düşün tamam oldu.
At the end of October, I became very ill, and due to that, because of the medical condition, I stopped teaching there.
Thank you very much. Would you please explain to the tribunal that when the students were brought to your classes, were their feet and hands chained or they were free to walk?
Sizin şu sınıf kirgen vaqtda bu kelgen o'quvchilar erkin bana yoki ularning qo'lida kishan
Ben abay deganga o'xshash, ben bu ota onasining kirgan vaqtimda u yerda tutqunlar qo'llarida zanjir kishan tutqunida ular hattoki kamerdan chiqib kirgichimi temir eshiklar zanjirlar bilan 30 gradus ichilgan bo'lg'achqa ular xuddi ishga o'xshab o'milab chiqib o'milab kiradi. Andiki ota onasi sinfda bular kichik o'rindiqlarda zo'ng'ib o'tirdi, intayin qiynalib, intayin azobli yashaydi.
They were chained, shackled. When they came, even when they left their cell, and the door was only partly opened and with a chain on. Therefore, they had to crawl out and crawl in. They didn't walk like a normal human being. And even in the class, they had to sit on a small stool.
Were they called by their names or by numbers?
Pardon?
Were the students called by their names in the classes or by numbers?
Bularni normal chaqirgan vaqtda ularning ismi orqali chaqirganlarmi yoki nomeri orqali chaqirganlarmi?
Biz ularning ismini men bilmaymiz. İsim atashma ma'ni qilindi. Ularning faqat jilkisining ustiga qo'yilgan nomerlar var, besilgan nomerlar. Shu nomer orqali chaqiriladi. numara arkalık bilet kullandı.
It was all by numbers. I didn't know the names of any of them. We called by the numbers that was printed on the jacket.
Finally, Ms. Siddiq, could you briefly explain to the tribunal when a relative was introduced to you by the party? In 2017, the Chinese government introduced a relative to come and live with Ms. Siddiq and her family. Can she briefly talk about that?
Siz şu 2017 yılı tuqqan dilli tuqqan buluş degan bir Xitoy kadrninki uyimizda turganligi to'g'risida qisqacha shuni tushuntirib bergansiz.
Ben yana 2017 yıldan bu yan Xitoy hukumatiniki her bir ailege mecburi o'rlashtirilgan qo'shmoq tuqqan Xitoy kadrlarini kutishga majbur bo'ldim. Bu Xitoy kadri her ayda bir hafta uyimizda qo'natdi.
So in 2017, under the becoming family policies, the male cadres were forced to live with the Uyghur families was forced to house male cadres, and I was also one of them. And the male cadre who lived in my house, at least he would live 1 week a month.
Bu qo'shmoq tuqqan Xitoy kadrining qo'lida Xitoy hukumati tushirgan hujjatlar bor edi. Ya'ni buningda 5 ta birga bo'lish degan hujjat, bu Xitoy kadri shu hujjatdan foydalanib har xil huquqliqlarni, dafsanchiliklarni qiladi.
This male cadre had a document that was given to him, which says 5 together policy. And because of that 5 together, he had freedom and abused that freedom, tried to do all sorts of terrible things in my house.
Bu 5'te birga bo'lish hujjati birga tomoq yetish, birga tomoq yeyish, birga uyg'onish qilish, birga sayl qilish, birga yetish.
So this 5 together is cook together, eat together, and go out together, and sleep together, study together, 5 together.
Bu Xitoy kadri mushu 5 xil birga bo'lishdan foydalanib, sobiq yo'ldoshim bor yerdimi, menga har xil huquqlarni qildi. Men bu dafsanchiliklarni, bu huquqlarni qat'iy unutay olmayman.
Because of this 5 together policy, even in front of my ex-husband, my husband, he harassed me, sexually harassed me, and I cannot forget that experience.
Yani mesela biz tomoq yetish jarayonida bu Xitoy doim qishimga chiqib oladi. Chunki birga tomoq yetishni o'rganish deb bor bizda deb. Bo'lsa qarab o'rgansam bo'ladi deyman. Lekin bu Xitoy sen majbur mening qo'limni tutib turib men o'tishing kerak deb, mening qo'limni tutib turib yurishimni majburlaydi. Tomoq pishib bo'lgandan keyin birga o'tirib yegan vaqtimizdami, bu qasdanga bak issiqga uyim, men bak issiq ketdim deb o'zining kiyimlarini butunlay savitib, faqat qaltishtalar bilan o'shada o'tirib birga tomoq yedi.
And because the cooking together policy, he would come to the kitchen and say, well, I need to learn cooking from you. And he forced me to teach him holding and his hand. Also, when we were during the eating time, he would complain it's too hot. The room is too hot. He would take off all his clothes, just leaving a short, and would sit with us and eat like that.
Hatta ki tomoqlarımdaki o'xshabdi, sen bek güzel xonim, men sendan bek xush oldum, seni quchoqlamasam bo'lamdi, suyib olsam bo'lamdi deb sobiq yo'ldoshim bor yerdimi, meni u yerda quchoqlab oladi, hatto ki meni necha qator suyib oldim. Men bu dafsanchiliklardan faqat bardosh beramadim, lekin yana shu kulib turishga majbur bo'lib o'tirdim.
often said that you are a beautiful woman and your food is so tasty. And by saying that, he would come and hug me and kiss me. And I had to smile at him, even though I was so upset inside, but I had to present myself as that he is welcoming, and I can never forget those experiences.
Thank you, Ms. Sethi. The tribunal members may now have questions for you.
Good morning. When you were selected to teach in the camp after the thorough evaluation exercise that had been conducted, why do you think they selected you?
Sizning nazaringizda nima sababdan, nima uchun sizni tanlab qoldi?
Men oldi bilan Xitoy tilida o'qigan, bu maktabda 28 yil Xitoy tili darsi o'tdim.
I studied in Mandarin and I taught in that school for 28 years.
Men bu maktabda birdan-bir O'zbek millatim 2016 yildan boshlab bu Xitoylar bizning maktabimizda o'qituvchilarni har xil shaklda uchiq dars o'tishga, har xil shaklda Xitoy tili imtihon berishga o'rlashtirildi. Eng oxirida buni xulosalab natijalab, imtihon numeri natijasi eng yuqori bo'lganini baholab shu yerga iletdi.
So I was the only Uzbek ethnic in that school, and since 2016 there was an open class assessment process, and they selected the one who had the highest score.
You were told you were going to teach Mandarin to illiterates. When you arrived at the camp, were the men illiterate? And did some of them or many of them speak Chinese already?
Sizga savodsizlar darsi o'tishanda yo'lda turdim. Siz u yerga borgandan keyin erlarniki savodsizligini ko'rdingizmi? Yoki u yerdagi erlar Xitoycha biladimi? So'zlaganlarni angladim.
To'g'ri, siz aytgandek, bizga yig'inlashganda, bizga uxtaganda, sizlarga biz bir turkum savodsizlarni yig'ib berdik. Shularga davlat tilida dars o'tsa deb ivatgan. Amaliyotda men borgan u atalmish savodsizlarga tarbiyalash markazida u yerdagi o'xshamaydi bular yig'in aytgan o'xshash. Chunki bu yer intayin qattiq qamal qilingan bir turma, bir lager, bir kamp edi. Bu yerdagi kishilar dastlab tutib kelganlar diniy zotlar ulamolar bo'lg'achqa ular haqiqatan Xitoy tilini bilmaydi.
Well, as you have just mentioned, Your Honor, I was told that I will be teaching Mandarin to these illiterate people. But when I arrived there, the place wasn't like an ordinary school. It was a secured camp, and the people, majority of the men there were religious clerics, religious scholars.
Lekin 3-oyning 20-sidan 4-oyning 10-gacha tutib kelingan ko'p sondagi shu tutqunlarning hammasi 18 yoshdan 40 yoshgacha, ya'ni bular hammasi intayin oliy bilim yurtlarida bilim oshirgan oliy ma'lumotlar, chet ellarda, Amerikada, Yevropa davlatlarida o'qib qaytib kelib vatanga o'zining tuqqanlari bilan ko'rishib ulgurmay bu kampus tutib kelingan oliy ma'lumotlar ziyolilar edi. 18 yoshdan 40 yoshgacha.
So later, the new arrivals were later. They mainly was aged 18 to 40 years old. Many of them actually studied abroad. They already were very well educated, young Uyghurs.
So you taught for 6 to 7 hours a day in that camp. to different groups. What were you teaching them in that time?
Siz her günü 6 saatten 7 saatlik ders yapıyorsunuz. Bu dersler nemin öğretmeniz bir yer?
Biz dastlabda bu 6 saatdan 7 saat hattoki shaharda tekshirishlar keldi deganda 8 soat davomida bu darsimiz. Chunki ularni takror qilib chiqishimiz kerak. Dastlabda Xitoy tili darsiniki asosiy bilimlarni o'rgatdik. Keyinida Xitoylarning o'zini atvagan qizil naqshini o'rgatdik.
So yes, in the beginning, some days, most of the days, I taught 6 to 7 hours. There were days that when there are officials, I had to teach 8 the inspector. And the teaching was in the beginning basic Mandarin, and then later I had to teach red songs.
Qatarlıq məzmunlardakı aşağıdan özü bitkilagan, özləri bizə şürkəyə açılmaq.
The red songs is like national anthem, and also the songs that is praise China, the Communist Party, and such as if there is no Communist Party, we don't have a happy life. Most of the songs are in that kind of context.
You were there as a teacher, so I imagine had limited contact with the men outside the class. You've given us evidence of torture and other ill treatment. What were your sources for that evidence beyond what you were able to see yourself?
And this is o'qituvchi bo'lgandan keyin siz ular bilan o'sha erlar bilan bevosita aralashib fursatimiz yo'q. Ammo siz ularninki intayin qiyin qisloqqa ilinganligi, xo'rlanganligi to'g'risida bizga so'zladingiz. Siz bizga tushuntirib bergan boshqa yana qandaq bir faktlarimiz bor, misolga shularniki xo'rlanganligi degan o'zingizniki.
Bu joydagi tutqun qilingan erlar, men yuqorida aytgandek haqiqatan har jihatdan qiyin qisloqlarga uchraydi, ko'rinadi. Andan keyin men odatda normalda dars o'tib, darsdan tushib qaytadigan vaqtida bu joydagi ular bizlar normal paranglashib qat'iy bo'lmaydi. Lekin shular o'zining jinidan joq to'ygan bo'lg'achqa bir shiqqatim yuz berdi bu voqea. Bir qatim darsdan qaytib chiqib olsam, o'tirdagi bir diniy zot kishga uning ketida shunday his qildim. U dediki, mening uyim Simot zavod mechitning ichida. Mening 5 bolam bor, kichik amisi. Men sizni utilib qolay ma'lum. Ashlar xabar qilib qo'ysangiz, mening bir shay deganimni bilib qolsin deb menga yolvirdi. Biz kelimiz qarab ularga gap qilishga, qarashga qat'iy bo'lmaydi. Shuning uchun men uni anglamagan hisob chiqyaptim.
As I said, in the male camp, these men were always often tortured, and they were not allowed to have any communication with us. But few times they took the risk, and the one man told me that, "Teacher, I live in the cement factory. My house is near the cement factory. Can you please tell them that I am here?" Because the family members didn't even know how they were, where they were taken. However, the next day, that man disappeared.
Yana bir necha kundan keyin bu joyda Xitoy tili o'rganishga oid aktiv bir kishi bor edi. Bu kishi bu darsdan tushib qaytayotgan vaqtimda yana menga dedi, "Ma'lum mening uyim Tangirtog' rayonidagi Dava yo'lida Toshkent restoranidagi beqimda bir do'konimiz bor. Mening ayolim yangi degan asqaga, mening ayolim mening mishadagim xaroba bo'lib qolsin." Dedi, men unga javob berishga ilojisiz qaramay chiqib qoldim.
There was another young man who was very active in the class, and so on my way out of the class, and he approached me and said, "Teacher, I live in the Tangratag Divan Street, near the Tashkent restaurant. My wife was about to give birth, so can you please let her know that I am here? And I couldn't say anything. I just walked out because I was not allowed to speak to her.
Bu joydagi so'roq chaqirib chiqilgan erlar haftalab, hattoki oylab darsga qatnashamaydi. Bular o'zining kameralarida qiyin qissalar eg'irligidan bular menish magan bo'lg'achqa kameralarda davolanadi. Nurg'unlari eg'ir qiyin qissalarni azoblarni boshqa kameralarga yetkazib ketildi deb anglaydik. Amaliyotda bu yerdagi nurg'un kishilarning yana eg'ir diabet kasali, yoshirin yurak kasali bor ekan, qon besimi bor ekan degan sabablar bilan nurg'un kishilar bu yerda o'lib ketdi.
After men taken for interrogation, many of them couldn't attend the class for months because of the injuries. And there were men who disappeared, but we were told that because they had a suffered from diabetic or heart condition and died as a result.
Xitoy hukumati nurg'unlagan videolarni ishlatib, kompaniyalar tarbiyalashdan tutirib chiqdi, biz ularni qo'yib degan bo'ldi. Amaliyotda sirti qo'yib etilganlar qiyin qisloq jarayonida put-qo'llari yaralangan, ham kesib etilgan ashunday kishilar. Chunki ko'chalarda jamiyatda nurg'un majruhlar ko'payib ketdi. Hatto so'zlash nemisdan masala ko'rilgan ro'yi jihatdan lisan uchirgan bunday kishilar ko'chalarda jamiyatda ko'plab ketdi.
The Chinese government made many videos saying that they have released all these people in re-education, in so-called re-education. But we know these people, the ones who were released, they had many became disabled, and many had mental disability, mental health problems.
In your interactions with the staff in both camps, particularly ones with more authority, what did they say the purpose of the camps was, and how did they describe the women and the men? What sort of terms did they use to describe them?
Əməldarlar bilan paranlaşgan vaqtlarda ularning eg'izidan shu lagerdagi qamalgan kishilarni ular qanday atadi, ularni nima deb atadi?
Men shu joydagi saqchi amaldorlar bilan, gundupay boshliqlari bilan qo'roda paranglashdim, chunki qo'roda kuzish apparatlari yo'q bo'lg'achqa ular faqat ularni tutqunlar deb ataydi. Tutqunlar deb ataydi. Andan keyin men shulardan nurg'un ma'lumotlarga, bularning masalan qanday qiynash usullari bor, bularni qanday so'roq harakatlari bor, usullari bor ishlarni bilatdim. Bulardan ko'p ma'lumotlarni, ko'p xabarlarni
The guards and the police in that camp often called those people just as tutqunlar, detainees. So from their own expression, or from their own words, that I learned a lot about how they tortured them and the methods of torture.
Bu joyga saqchi şoförler bizni o'zining mashinasida olib boradi, akildi, to'shiydi. Bu to'shish jarayonida shu saqchi şoför saqchi Xitoyga o'zini ta'miran saqchi Xitoyga suhbat jarayonida men anlatdi. Ya'ni har doim bu joyga qamalgan tutqunlar jamiyat uchun bir ofat. Hukumat bularni mushu kamp lagerlarda ujuqtirib tugutish kerak. Chunki bular jamiyatga qo'yib etilsa, bular bir ofat degan gaplarni takror aytdi.
So, from my home to the camp, I was transported in a police car. And there were times that there was official sat in the car. And the conversation between the driver and the official, and the driver specifically often called these people in the camp, they are that disasters. They would bring disasters to the country. Therefore, they should be exterminated.
Mrs. Siddiq, in 2017 and 2018, I think you underwent 3 processes related to birth control. Could you tell us what those were?
2017 to
And 18.
yeah.
ikki ming o'n yettinchi yili bizdagi aholilar komiteti topimizda mana bu uqtirishga o'xshash bizga maxsus uqtirish kerakdi. Dastlabda 2017-18 yillarda bu uqtirish 18 yoshdan 50 yoshgacha qiz ayollar Tağırtaq rayonidagi mana bu Çanlayan o'ltiraq rayoni.
So we often receive a notice like this from the neighborhood committee, and that is the place where we lived. We just showed in the photo there. So after this
Muşlarni alattık. Bular bu uqtirishlarda ko'rsatgandek biz cho'qim shu joyga berib, uzuk soldirish, tug'maslik operatsiyasi qildirishimiz kerak.
So the notice is about that we must go to that designated place to have IUD inserted or sterilization process.
Uqtirishda aytganda biz agar ularning xizmatiga moslashmasak, bütün tuqqanlarimizni, hatta yo'lishimizni doğru tikan bo'ldi ekanmiz, ham o'zimizdanmi bexatarligimiz yaxshi bo'lmaydi ekan.
And the spread was if we didn't follow this instruction, then either our family members, including our husband, would have the consequences. Also, personal consequences as well.
Hem bu uqtirish aniq degandek, agar yana moslashmasangiz, saqchixonaga berib, tumor o'rnida o'tirsiz deb qo'shgan.
It said if you didn't comply with the request, you will be end up sitting on the metal chair in the police station.
2019 yılı 5. ayın ahiri mana bu Urim şehir Tağırtaq rayonu Çanlayan'daki o ambulatoriyada ben bu neç yüzügen kızlarla okşaş 4 saatler ücret turup ya da operasyon, tuğmaslık operasyonu kılındı.
In May 2019, along with many hundreds of other females, waiting in a queue for 4 hours, and I was also put through sterilization process. That was a hospital where I had that sterilizing process.
Çanlayan'daki
Which is a region in Changlao-yuan.
How many children do you have, Mrs. Siddiq? And what was the law? How many did the law allow you to have at the time you were sterilized?
Benim fakat bir kızım var. Bu kızım Gollandiya'da okuydu. 2011 yılı 5. ayda Gollandiya'da oturaklaşkan. Adeta Xitayda Uygurlarga, yani Uygurlarga iki farzandlik dep var.
I only have a daughter who went to Netherlands in May 2011, and since she's been living there. By law for Uyghur people, we can have 2 children.
Biz yeni hizmet katlaşkan boğaçta hizmet besimimiz kat yukarı. Ben şu bir farzandlik olgan. Anadaki bu Xitay hükümeti bizge mahsus planlık tuğutki şeref puanamısı bergen. Lekin bu operasyon kılgan vaktimizde o puanamını etraf kılıyor.
Due to high pressure from my work, I only had 1 child. And I even received a certificate for having one child. But later they didn't even consider that certificate.
My final question, you were given a visa and were able to leave. Why do you think you were allowed to leave?
And sizga vizga Xitoydan chiqishga ma'qul bo'ldi. Nima uchun sizga Xitoydan chiqishga ruxsat qildi sizga?
Ben aldı bilen yana abay degandek Özbek milleti vatan qaytgan muhacir boğaşqa 2019 yılı 1. ayda kızım men ve sabık yoldaşımga tuqqan yo'qlar chaqiriq qog'ozi iletgan 2019 1. ayda. Biz bu chaqiriqni tarjima qildirib
So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an Uzbek ethnic, and in January 2019, my daughter sent us an invitation to visit her in Holland.
bu biz chaqiriq qog'ozini tarjima qildirib shu joydagi Xitoy soqchilarini qishiga kirdik. Kirgan vaqtimizda Xitoy soqchilar mening kartlarimni ko'rib, sen O'zbek millati ekansan, vatan qaytgan muhojir ekan, sen chet elga chiqishingni o'ylasak bo'ldi dedi. Lekin sobiq yo'ldoshimni sen Uyg'ur ekansan, chet elga chiqishni ham xayol keltirma deb uni qaytarib aytdi.
So after had the invitation letter translated in Chinese, and we went to the office and where they process the in charge of people who go abroad. And they checked both my husband's and my documents. And I was told that it is possible that I can go because I am Uzbek ethnic. And then they said openly to my husband that you are Uyghur, so do not even dream to leave the country.
Thank you for your evidence to this tribunal, Mrs. Siddiq.
Mr. Clark or Professor Moore has a short question to make us the time of people. Microphone.
When you went to get sterilized, would you say that was forcibly sterilization? Would that be the description?
Mecbur kılındığını, yani siz anlatıp özünüz makul boğanlıktan boğanlıktan kıldık hesaplarınız.
Bu tug'maslik operatsiyasi majbur qilindi. Chunki men apa ko'rsatganga o'xshash, bular uqtirishlarni evatidi. Uqtirishga qarasangizmi, uningda siz ixtiyor tanlash huquqingiz faqat yo'q. Shundoq bo'lsa-mu, men yana o'zimni Xitoy hukumati bergan sharaf guvohnomasi bilan turibdi, shu kartamni elib, O'zbek millati vatan qaytgan muhojir degan kinishkilarni elib, shu aholi komitetiga kadr qizni qishiga kirib, ashunga yolvorgan bo'ldim. Chunki mening birli qizim bor, men hech kimni tug'mayman. Sizning qanday jadvallaringizga qo'l qo'yishga men rozi edi. Lekin bu faqat kartamadi.
It's forced sterilization. As I mentioned earlier in the notice, they don't give you the choice. They said very clearly the consequences if we didn't comply. I took my documents, including the proof of that I am Uzbek, returned from the Uzbekistan to the country, and I begged the girl that I have the certificate and I am Uzbek, but they said there is no negotiable. It is not negotiable. I must go through the process.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Microphone, I think.
Oh, sorry. The camps that you were teaching in could broadly be described as education camps. Did any of your students who reached particular levels of being able to speak Mandarin and meet the other requirements ever be released from the camp?
Başka yerlerden anlaganda bu sizinki ders ötken bu lager terbiyeleş lager. Yani sizin okuvchilaringizning ichida bir darajaga, yani darsdan bir darajaga erişip şu yerden koyup etilgenlerdir.
Ya undaqlar bo'lib boqmadi. Chunki bu gerçi atalmış tarbiyalash o'rni bo'lgan bilan hech qanday o'quvchi bu yerda darajaga erishib boqmadi, ham qo'yib o'tilmadi. Biz bu 6 oy jarayonida bir qatam o'quvchilarni sinab imtihon boqmadi.
Although it is called education, but we never had even assessed these so-called students. And I was there for 6 months when we never had one exam to assess. So there wasn't anyone I released from that visit.
Mr. Zamin, before I address you, some witnesses have given accounts before, as I indicated in my opening remarks. I think that Kelvin Siddiq is one. And if so, has the PRC said anything adverse to her of which we are aware? Thank you.
Apart from calling her actor, like the other witnesses, nothing.
Well, that's not specific. Thank you, Mr. Sabi. And thank Kelvin Siddiq for giving evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Adil. Your evidence is now complete. Mr. Chairman, our next witness is Mr. Omar Bakari.
Thank you very much, but I would like to add a few things. Çünkü guvallık veriş jarayonida izchil turda biz Xitoy hukumatining Xitoy saqchilarining shunday har xil hujjatlarda takliflariga bisimlarga uchrab keldik. Toki tunugün tushdan keyin qadar Xitoy saqchilari meniki boshlang'ich maktabdagi sekretar boshliqimizni va sobiq yo'ldoshimni video so'zlatib, meni bugungi o'sha Angliya sudida so'zlaydigan so'zlarimning hammasining yolg'onligini, meni azaldan kamp lagerlarda dars o'tib boqmaganim, ham bizning u joyda Sharq Turkiston vatanimizda kamp lager ta'sis qilinib boqmagan, bu hammasi yolg'on. Hatto yo'ldoshimni so'zlatib, sobiq yo'ldoshimni meni ayolim bu operatsiyasi qildirib boqmagan, u yana tug'alaydi, degan ta'kidlar keldi.
Since I have been giving evidence, I was harassed. And that is a photograph of the policeman from the local police where I lived. Apart from that, even yesterday they released a video. In that video, my husband and the secretary of the school gave evidence claiming that I have never taught in any camp, and I have never had sterilization process. I've never been through that.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We must now bring your evidence to a close, but if you have further information to give, please convey it to counsel outside and afterwards. Thank you. Thank you.
Hammalarga ko'pdan ko'p rahmat.
ma'qul xonim.
Thank you very much. Free to leave the room or to stay, of course. Mr. Sabi, did you say the next witness was
The
Bakari?
next witness is Mr. Omar Bakari.
Yes.
His statement is at page 25 of the bundle. And Mr. Abraham would be handling this witness.
And is he here in person?
Yes, sir.
And there should be someone to take. Could you? Thank you very much. Maybe, Mr. Sabi, that we need one usher to take in and one usher to take out, rather than just one.
Proceed.
There's just a concern that there's a smell of burning, but I'm not sure whether it is or not. Okay, there's a smell of burning, but I'm not sure whether there's anything significant, so we'll just check before we start. I think that's a gentleman from the hall behind. Oh, he's gone out. Does anybody else notice the smell?
Yes.
Right. Stay where you are. There's no reason for alarm, but I think we might as well see if there's any known reason for it. Is there any known reason for the smell of burning that people are noticing? Is there any known reason for the smell of burning that some people are noticing? Safe to continue? Thank you. Sabi.
Mr. Abrams.
The witness is a male Chinese national of Kazakh and Uyghur ethnicity. He was detained in 3 camps over a period of 9 months exclusively with other Uyghurs on allegations related to terrorism. In the camps, he suffered ill treatment at the hands of law enforcement officials, including being beaten with various weapons, having his fingertips pierced with needles, and being hanged from the ceiling. The witness in all 3 camps was subject to extensive body examinations where samples of blood and urine were taken, his organs were examined, his irises assessed, and fingerprints and voice recordings made. Blood was taken from all prisoners each month. In one camp, the prisoners were forced to take unknown medicines. In another camp, the witness was held in extremely poor conditions with up to 35 men in a cell, living on a subsistence diet where the witness lost half his body weight. Young men between 16 and 40, with whom the witness was held, frequently disappeared from their cells. All the men were forced to re-educate in line with CCP policies. The witness knows of 2 named individuals who died in the camp as a result of torture, and he heard that many died from what the witness has described as being placed in a water prison. As a result of the witness going public about his treatment in Kazakhstan, his brother, sister, and mother, as well as his father, were detained. The witness states that his brother was rendered disabled as a result of treatment during detention, and his father was tortured to death. His mother and sister are said to have suffered. Mr. Bakari, I have a few questions, if I may. Your witness statement refers to 7 to 10 men disappearing out of a cell of about 40 men a week. Can you provide further details on these disappearances?
Ma'qul, xonimlar, afandilar. Men bugun bu yerda sotda berayotgan guvohlikni hammasiniki chinligiga guvohlik beraman.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I can promise and I can swear that I will speak the truth, but the truth.
Bu yerda men 3 kampda yatdim. Har bir kamerda 45 kishi 35 dan 45 kishi insonlar birga yetishga majbur bo'ldik.
I was in 3 different camps. In each camp, in a cell, up to 35 to 40 cellmates had to share one cell.
Har haftada eng navqiron bolalar 16 yoshdan 40 yoshga bo'lgan insonlar almış chiqib turadi, qaytib kelmaydi ular. Yangi insonlar kelib turadi.
The male aged from 16 to 40, every week some were taken out from the cell and never returned. Then they replaced by newcomers.
The witnesses stated that the men disappeared under a pretext. Was there any pattern as to who disappeared and who remained in their cells?
Siz şu jarayonda yosh bolalarninki, ya'ni erlarning yo'qolib ketganligini aytasiz. Shundan bu yo'qolib ketganlarninki qandaq bir alohidligi bordi yoki nima uchun yo'qolib ketgan? To'g'risi biroz tushuncha bersangiz.
Menmi nihoyatda bir sog'lom bir inson edim. Ya'ni 125 kilogramm keladigan salmoqli bir kishi edim. U yerga kirgandan keyin bizni shu sizlar ko'rgandek zanjirlarda bog'lanib, eng ezib qolgan holatdami ba'zi insonlarniki immunity, sog'lom turish nimasi yaxshilar. Shunaqa insonlarimiz, ya'ni 16-40 insonlar har vaqt g'oyib bo'lishi bu normal ahvolda uning ichida.
I was a healthy man, very strong, 115 kilo when I was arrested. And the male who detained in those facilities, especially those between age 16 to 40, they were very healthy.
Ularniki sog'lomligi va nimasi, odatdagi nimasi bizga qaraganda normal. Ham yaxshida turish nimasini taqob qo'ysangiz, boshqa insonlarimiz yo'qolib ketadi.
So those who were especially healthy and strong, those were the ones disappeared.
Did any of those who disappeared, were they returned to their cells, or was that the last the witness had heard of them?
No, I don't remember seeing anyone return.
You've referred to detainees being placed in a water prison. Can you describe what that was?
Siz bayanatınızı su turmusunu sözləpsiz. Məşin bir düşündük birəmsiz su turmusu yəni neyini?
O yerda biz o yerda ularga bo'lgan qarishliklarimiz, bo'ysunmasliklarimiz, boshqa jazoga uchraymiz. Bu su turmusi degan narsam, men shaxsan o'zim uni o'chirmadim, ammo o'chirgan bolalar bizga so'zlab berdi. İnsanlarni o yerda su turmusiga bo'ynunkagacha suvga chilab, bir sotka esib qo'yiladi.
So we endure 5 different types of torture. The water prison, though I have not experienced personally, but according to the people who experienced the prison, the person will be sunk inside water up to the neck and hang from the ceiling.
Can you tell us who was sent there and how many of the detainees were sent there?
Sizin bilişinizce kimlerin şehri yolladı, kancı tutkular şehri yollandı? Özünüz bilişiniz.
Su turmusiga mi? Su turmusi yo'llangan boladan men ikkisini bilaman. Birisi Jur'atjon degan bir enimiz, 26 yosh atrofida. Birisi Amatjon degan bir enimiz. 23 yosh. O aniq ismi da Amatjon degan enimiz.
I remember 2 names. They were both young. Named Jurat, who was 26, and Ahmed, who was 23.
You stated you gave blood once a month and note that it lasted 15 to 20 minutes. Can you confirm whether the procedure lasted 15 to 20 minutes or blood was drawn for that period?
Siz her ayda bizim kanalda bu jaryan 15 minutdan 20 minutçilik bo'lib turibsiz. Bu jaryan demekçi bo'lganimiz shu qonilish boshdan oxirgi jaryonimi, qaysi jaryon bu? Shuni
Bu bizni har oyda boshqalarning hammasini o'sha mustaqillik bizniki kichkinda ashada qo'lga chiqaramiz. Taxminan bizning farzimiz bu. Soat qarab bizning soatmi yo'q yani. O'lcharda shuni 10 minut atrofida olib beradi. Albatta biz qarshi insonlar.
Okay. Well, the time that I mentioned is a kind of approximate time. I didn't have a watch to check the time. But when we came to draw blood, we just have to stretch our arm through the small hole on the door. Perhaps they mentioned the foot slot, and that's where they take blood. Sometimes it could be 10 or 15 minutes.
Your statement refers to doctors, teachers, and lawyers as being starting to be detained. In terms of profession, do you know what proportion of detainees were professionals?
Şahsen ben etrafımda yatkan insanlarını bilişimde iniq esimde var. Qarmay şehri, bir neft şehri. Bu yerda qonun organi işlenen Atavullah degan advokat efendim var. İkinci mektebide o'qituvchilardan Tahir muallim degan kishilar bor. Uning ichida hatto savdogarlar bor, cho'ng shirkat ochgan tijoratchilar, restoran ochgan tijoratchilar, har soha insonlarini o'z ko'zi bilan ko'rdim, ham ularni bildi gapdi. Tahir muallim.
Well, the cell where I shared with other people, mostly quite well educated. For example, Atavullah. Who was a lawyer, and Tahir was a teacher, and many very
his mother and his siblings are living normal lives in Xinjiang. Those are the three claims.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Mr. Clark.
Good morning. Can I start by going back to the beginning of your statement? And you say that in 2006 you decided to leave Xinjiang and move to Kazakhstan, the nationality of your father. What were the circumstances? You talked about, I think, injustice and discrimination then. What were the circumstances in 2006 that caused you to leave?
Siz bayanatınızdan 5 yıl dersiz 2006 yılı Kazakistan'da çıkıp eşyalarındaki vatandaşlıkını alışık karar verirsiniz ve bunun da vatandaki ağır temsilcilerden sözlersiz. Müşünle kısaca bir düşündürmek istiyorsunuz.
Ben 97-yılı İlgilik Başbuğrası Kaspi Üniversitesi'ni tutturup Beycan'da karmaya hizmetke orunlaştım. Lekin benim okuyan kasbimge ait hizmet bulmasdan bir şoförlük hizmetine eriştim.
Having graduated from a university in Beijing in 1997, I returned to Karmai, but was unable to obtain a job in the profession that I received. I became a driver.
Keyin bizniki bu yerda xizmatlardagi maosh taqsimoti, yaxshi xizmat o'rinlarida yüzünüzge Uyg'ur ve Qozoqlarni kamsitib turib, yaxshi xizmat va yaxshi maosh taqsimotlar hech qachon berilmaydi.
Even including the salaries that we received, especially for Uyghurs and the Kazakh people, due to the discrimination, systematic discrimination, we received very unfair treatments.
So you moved to Kazakhstan and then traveled extensively between PRC and Kazakhstan. Did you ever have any reason to believe that you were at risk of being detained when you made these travels as you were in 2017?
And siz Kazakistan'da yerleşkenden keyin daim berip kelip жүрüpsiz. And 2017 yılı qaytqa vaqtimizda bir taraz qilib baqqandingizmi, meni tutib ketami degan mundaq bir ko'nglingizdan bir o'tganmi shundaq bir gumon?
Yo'q.
When you were first detained, you were taken from a police station to a hospital and had a medical examination. You say in your statement that you were worried that that was going to lead to organ extraction. Why was it that you thought that was a possibility?
And sizni tunji ketim o'rganishdi. Doktorxonaga olib boribdi. Bu yerda sizningki ichki a'zolaringizni tekshiribdi. Shu jarayonda o'zimizningki ichki a'zolarimizni evolami degan shunday bir qo'rqinchlikda bo'libsiz. Nima uchun bunday bir qo'rqinchlikda bo'ldingizmi? Shuni biroz tushuntirib berasiz. Nima sababdan bunday o'yladingiz?
Çünkü ben özüm Kazakistan'da ticaret kılavatkan vaxtlarımdımı, özüm okuyan kesbim, şu sayahat ve ilk başlangıç kesbi boğalık için, bu kızıqıma akbarat nümasındaki yeniliklarla nümayende kızıqıp durman. Şu sebepten ben kalın oluşlarını ki, organlarına illivatkanlıkı, hatta bizdeki şu buran öndü, ağır cinayetler kesilgen Uygur qېrىنداشلىرىمىزنىڭki, öldürülüp taşlanıp turmalarda, cesetini vermeydiğen ahvalardan haberim var.
During my time in Kazakhstan, while I was doing business, and because of my what I studied was business and tourism, I always interested in more information, and I've learned that the Falun Gong practitioners' organs were harvested, as well as the prisoners, the Uyghur prisoners. Also their organs were targeted.
Meni o'sha tashlagan vaqtida ün-tinsiz ovoz chiqarmasdan har vaqt atrofimda insonlar shunda apirib, men ishim tarqatishni bilmayman. O'zida kiyimlarimni soldirib, majburiy shunda tashlashni o'tilishida eng oxirida shu kiyimni yalang'ochlab bilan surib tashlagan vaqtida men yüreklerim döküldü. İşten siyaretin tas kağıtı okumuştum.
It was extremely terrifying experience for me because the people who were examining me, I could feel, although I had a black hood over my head, I couldn't see, but I could feel there were about 3 people not saying anything. And when they placed that cold gel on my body and when they started examining, that time I almost like passed water. That's how nervous I became.
But do you know what the basis then for that very thorough medical examination was, why it was done?
Endi sizce bularninki bu kadar inçiklep tekshirishdagi sababi nima?
Biz xuddi Qotandagi qo'yga o'xshab qolgan bir millat bo'lganligimiz uchun ular mana hozir sizlar ko'rayotgandek xalqaroda qo'rqmasdan halol organ tashrifatini aniq qilyotidi. Bizlarning yana bir ish qiyin qistoq olgan vaqtidami bizniki mana shu ichki organlarimiz qattiq ziyon zahmat o'chirmagan holatda qiynaydi.
Well, our people, we become like cattle. You could hear now, even on the international stage, they are loudly accusing us that we are lying. The organ harvesting is common, as you must have heard from media that they advertise a halal organ. And even when they tortured us, they made sure that our internal organs were not damaged.
When you were first detained, you were told, I think, that you had committed terror-related crimes. Did they explain what the basis for their view was, and did they produce any evidence that you had been involved in terror-related activity?
Sizni tunji tutgan vaqtda sizni terrorga bağlangan degandek shunday sabablar bilan sizni tutdi. Ama sizga buni tushundirdimi va qanday bir faktlarning borligi to'g'risida sizga bir tushuncha berdi?
Bu to'g'risida menga hech qanday tushuncha berilmadi. Faqatla meni o'zimning iqror qilishimni ularning meni qo'llashdagi sababniki ushbu jinoyatni orttirib qo'yapti. Shandong Konvensiya tashkilot qilish terrorlikqa, Zurjir Konvensiya tashkillash terrorlikqa, Wei Goja Anchuanji davlat parchash o'rnagan degan jinoyat. Yana birisi hammakin bu. Bu kishi Konvensiya terrorchilar aloqasida olgan degan jinoyatlarni atgan jadvalga qo'l qo'yishga majburlandim. O'zim ifoda qilishni talab qildi. Mustaqil. Anharda shu jinoyatga qo'l qo'yishga.
No, not at all. They have not presented any evidence whatsoever. On the paper, they showed me what I was accused of, organizing terrorism, instigating terrorism, and intention to split the country, separatism. And they forced me to sign that paper to admit those so-called crimes. I wasn't the only one. Everyone who was detained there, they all have experienced exactly the same pressure that they must sign that document. And in order to make them sign document, it would.
In the camp, you explained that as an education camp, there was education for detainees. Could you just say something briefly about the nature of that education?
Bu lagerni ular tarbiyalash lageri deydi. Sizce bu tarbiyalash bilan aloqasi bormi? Bu lagerni eng qisqa so'zda bir tasvirlab bersangiz.
Bu lagerlash acaba mendek bir shirkatniki muavin direktori bo'lgan insonga u lagerlarda dars o'rganishim yoki kasb egilishim ehtiyojim yo'qdi. Hatto meniki agar kampda o'ldirilgan dadamni hukumatga ishlab pensiyaga chiqqan bir insonni o'ldirildi. Ularning atalmış narsalar hepsi sahte, yalgan.
Well, there is no such education. I didn't need to be re-educated because I was a vice director of a company. And my father, who worked all his life for the government and who was detained and died in Canada, he didn't need to be educated.
You say that when you were in the camp, you were visited by Kazakh diplomats as a Kazakh citizen, and they explained to you your rights. What rights did they say that you had?
Siz şu lager jarayonida Kazak diplomatlarning kelganligi va siz bilan suhbat o'tkazgan, sizga o'zingizning huquqlarimiz to'g'risida tushuntirgan. Shu huquqlarni qanday tushuntirgan shularni gapirasiz.
Menga ularning tushuntirishida birinchi huquqim ular meni jismoniy emgakka sololmaydi ekan. İkincisi ağrıp qolsam davolaydi ekan. Shu vaqt tanqimni vaqtida beradi ekan. Bu mening huquqim ekan.
I was told that first of all they cannot force me to work, put me into forced labor. The second right I had is right to have medication. If I were ill, then I must receive medication. And the third right that I had, so I received 3 meals per day.
And did you explain to the diplomats the nature of the treatment that you had inside the camp?
Bu diplomatlarga sizniki şu lager jarayonidagi o'zimizniki topgan zulmlarimizni tushuntirib berardingiz.
Mümkün emas. Uning oldiga chiqishda ular qattiq tahdid qilib turib, agar yashirin bo'lsa, sen bu yerda yotgan bo'lgan ishlanish qanday demaysan deb, mana bu zanjirlarni etib tashlab, qo'limga ko'zini solgan oladiga chiqqan.
It wasn't possible. Before I was taken to meet them, and I was threatened that if I would tell anything that happened to me to those diplomats, and I might have death threat, I might die. And they removed all that chain and handcuffed me and took me in front of them.
And did you detect any different treatment as a Kazakh than the treatment that was being given to the Uyghur detainees?
And o'zimiz qozoq bo'lgan qozoq millati bo'lgan suhbatimiz bilan boshqa uyg'urlarga ko'rsatgan zulm siz bilan farqli bo'ldimi?
Bizning his qilishimizda burungi vaqtlarda jamiyatda va yoki bundan ishlab bo'lsin azab bir bo'lib uyg'urlar qaraganda boshqa millatlarda bir farq bor. Lekin men 2017-yil men o turma kirgandan keyin farqi yo'q.
Turma jarayonida sizlarda cho'qim Qozog'istonga ketalaydi degan bir farq bo'ldimi? Yani turma ichidagi uyg'urlar bilan sizga. In the past, it was slightly different. The treatment, it was Kazakh and it was Uyghurs were different. But after 2017, hardly any difference.
Ben chatlarlik deganim uchun, chatlarlik meni bunday muomala qilishga haqqim yo'q deganim uchun bir oy shu men 6 kvadrat tepdim, aslida 3 kvadratlik zindonda yetishga majbur bo'lganman. Yolg'iz kishi zindonda.
Once I questioned them that I am a Kazakh citizen and you have no right to treat me in such a way. For that, I was punished in a dark cell. Actually, I said 6 square meter. Actually, it was 3 square meter cell. I was locked up there for 1 month. In a dark.
In solitary confinement.
Solitary confinement.
When it came to the approach of your release, you were asked to sign, or required to sign, conditions for release. What were those conditions?
Sizni qo'yiladigan vaqtda sizga shart, bir qancha shartlarni qo'yib, unga qo'l qo'yib, ya'ni qo'yib berish shartlari. Bu qo'yib berish shartlarini tushuntirib beramiz.
Ularning shartlari, men uning ichida ko'rgan tatgan bu zulmlarni, bu ichidagi ichimishlik ahvollarni hech qanday hech kimga hatto o'zimning uydagilarga tinmaslik. agar normal hayot yashash imkoniyati uchun bo'ladigan bo'lsa, yoki ota-onamni ko'rib turishga erishmoqchi bo'lgan bo'lsam, cho'qim ovozimni qat'iy chiqarmaslikning ustida shartni qo'yib turib, imzo attırdı bular.
So the terms and condition was that if I ever want to return to the country and visit my parents again, then I must not say anything about what I have experienced and what I have witnessed during my detention.
And my last question is about your family. Your family stayed behind, didn't leave the country like you. There's a dispute, as the council team said, over the conditions in which your remaining family are living at the moment. And I just wonder if you could explain the basis for your belief, the statement about their treatment here, as opposed to the Chinese government's treatment, which is that they are living normal lives in China.
Sizinki ailemiz to'g'risida degan bayonotimizni degan ahvol bilan Xitoyninki hozir o'zida davotgan sizning shu yerda qilib qolgan oila tuqqanlarimizninki ahvoli ikkisi cho'ng farq bor ekan. Ya'ni ular boshqacha davlatda turishuning uchun faqat o'zingizninki bilishcha sizning urug' tuqqanlaringizninki ahvolini bizga gapira olasiz.
Bizniki oilamiz sizlarnikiga o'xshash nihoyat baxtli bir oila edi. Lekin shu lagerga mansublanib buni dunyo anlatgandan beri bizning oilalarniki men, otam, rahmatli onam, singlimning hammasi ularga nisbatan bir terrorchi oilasiga aylanib bo'ldi. Amaliyotda biz uni normal bir insonlar edik.
My family was a very normal, happy family. And since after I was detained, then after I was released, I started telling the truth to the world. My family suffered the consequences. My father died, and my sister, my brother, my sister and my brother, my mother, they were all branded a terrorist family, and they were suffering the consequences.
And how is he able to find out about their current condition?
Well, no news. Couldn't communicate with anyone. So cut off for some time now.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Vetch?
During the period of your detention and incarceration, please could you describe some of the ill treatment, torture, as you've alleged in your statement, that you suffered and or witnessed others suffering?
And then lagerdagi jarayonda siz bayonotimizda ba'zi inchki qiynash jarayonlarini bayonot qilganmiz. Shu jarayonlarni o'z eg'izingiz bilan so'zlab bersangiz qisqacha.
Fakat ismini alıp yok ama gözüne bırakayım. Dedim çayını 3 gündür. Ya 3 gündür geçer. Ya garip bir kısıtla yurdum mu 4 gündür. 4 çayını 3 gündür 7 gün geçer. Şimdi o 7 gün.
Yes, Your Honor. It is extremely hard for me to talk about it. I don't even want to remind myself about all those audios. But of course, for the first four days and nights, I was tortured intensely.
En dastlabda yo'lbos o'rinda o'tirg'izilib, o'ziga tokatda bilan qattiq urildim.
In the beginning, I was secured under this tiger chair and beaten up police buttons and an electric pot.
Keyin mana shunday Qarmay shaharlik Jaranbuloq Saqchidariston yarasida uyida mana shunday holatda bu Google'dan ilingan suratda efendiler to'g'ri tushunishni umid qilaman.
These pictures, I got it from Google. I just clarified that. It was a similar cell in Karmay region here. That was the basement of the police station, the detention.
Keyin manda is qo'yib, shu meniki butunlay qassam, dumbam, shu buljung go'shtimniki, hatto beton o'tirib turib tapınımğa, shu yog'och qaltaklar bilan, sim qamchilar bilan eng vahshiy usulda qiynadi meni.
I was hung from the ceiling, and then I all similar to this kind of position, and then they used thin wire and other tools, and hit my body all over my body, including my soul, the sole of my feet.
Ularning vahshiy qiynashlariga qarab to'xtabasdim. Yarim soat, hatto 1 soatcha urib qiynashlardim. Mola insonmi, emasmi deb o'ylab qolasiz.
While experiencing such horror non-stop, then it makes you to wonder whether those people are human.
Professor Kaur, do you have questions? Yes, sir, make them short, please.
You heard regarding the Karamay camps that all government ethnic minority employees were to have re-education, and that this was a directive from the central government. What do you mean by the central government? Who are you thinking of, or what are you thinking of?
Siz bu qayta tarbiyalash, yani atalmış qayta tarbiyalash bu merkez hükümetinden düşürülgen buyruk depsiz. Bu merkez hükümeti deganimiz nima?
Men buni endi tushunmadimmi, men undan mening xabarim yo'q. Men buni unda tarjima xatolik o'xshaydi. Men shu adolatsizliklarni shu Xinjiangga degan Xitoy qilyapti deb o'ylab, Bejingga berishni o'ylagan, ammo atamning nasibi bilan men undan yangilik voz kechgan. Bu Xitoylar qo'li ichib ildi bilan u yuqoridan kelmasa, bu ish bo'lmaydi deb, buni to'sigan Bejingga berishimiz.
Well, initially I thought it was Xinjiang who is responsible for all the sufferings that we have been put through, and therefore I decided to go to Beijing to make a complaint. And my father stopped me and saying that without the order from the central government from Beijing, this wouldn't happen.
Can you elaborate on that connection between Beijing and the region in northwest China?
Can you rephrase the question again?
What does your father mean by the fact that all orders come from Beijing to the region in question?
Hem de dadamızınki şu merkezden kendisi bu işler olmaydı degindeki ma'nini biraz tushundik bilan siz nima uchun shunday?
Mening atam rahmatlik 30 necha yil shu hukumatga xizmat ishlab pensiyaga chiqqan bir inson. Bu hukumatning qanday saxtipaz, qanday rangvas, aldamchi ekanligini biladi. Har qanday bir buyruqning shu markazdan kelganligiga oid hujjatlar hammasini xizmatlarni ishlagan. Shu sababdan atam buni besh qo'lda biladi, yaxshi biladi.
My father is a retired a civil servant who worked for the government over 30 years. So he knows the nature of the government, and he seen many official papers, and therefore he understands how the system cheats and lies. And he knew that there's no nothing can be achieved or can be implemented without the order from the central government, Beijing.
So you're talking about the Politburo here.
Bu yerdeki merkez hükümeti dediğimiz şu siyasi merkez Politburo shulardan keldi demek için yok.
Bizning nazarimizda biz uni ichki nimsida ishlamagan ekan, Zhongyangdan keladi deymiz, markaziy hukumatdan keladi deb buyruqlar bilamiz. Uni biz inchiklab kimdan keladi qanday uni qonun organlari baholamasa biz uni bilmaymiz.
I cannot really answer that question as I don't know how it works, but we assume it's from the central government. But how the central government work, obviously we don't have any information.
Thank you. Mr. Abraham, can you ensure that the photographs, if the witness is willing, are made available? We have anybody else? We have no further questions?
That ends our questions.
Thank you very much, Omar Bakari, for coming to give evidence. You're now free to go. By the clocks in the room, it's now 11:26. We're running behind. We'll take a 10-minute coffee break. Mates, means that we will start again at 11:36.
Assalamu alaikum, hörmətli qېرىنداشلار. ئەنگىلىيەدە ئېچىلىۋاتقان ئۇيغۇر سوت كوللېگىيىسىنىڭ 4-cü قېتىملىق يىغىنىنىڭ Facebook'tan, Twitter'dan, YouTube'dan ulap taqattık. Qېرىنداشلىرىم, bu hammamiz bilgandek bu sotna ait muhim. Bununla biz internet orqali, tor orqali müşahit olsak nəhayət yaxşı olur degan şekilde bunu qo'limizdan kelishicha qisqagina bo'lsa boshqa qismini ulab taqatdik qarindoshlarım. Shunga har biringizning buni yana ulab taqatib qo'yishini boshqa vaqtda qarindoshlarımizning yana buni atrofimizdagi boshqa qarindoshlarning ham bahrilab ko'rish uchun bo'libmi buningda ingliz tili bilmaydigan mana o'sha qarindoshlarımning ishimi deganda guvohlik berayotgan qarindoshlarımizning uyg'ur so'zlagan so'zlardan bir anglab buningdan bir uchur egallagan bo'lsa degan umidda inshaalloh Xitoy tajovuzchilarining irqiy qirg'inchilik qilyotdi degan qilmishning sudda qaror elinib Xitoyga irqiy qirg'inchilik tamg'isining urilishini Janob Allohdan tilaymiz qarindoshlarim. Bu Xitoy uchun o'chmas bir ig'ir jinoyat. Bu inshaalloh avlodlarimiz bundan foydalanib qoladi. İnşallah bunun neticesi zor oldu. Şunun için bunun sal qarash, bunun pervasız qilish, bu taza nimani bilmaslikning oqibati deb o'ylayman. Onun için buni qisqagina olsun men 5-2 soatlik, 2,5 soatlik yaqin taqib qatdiq. Har birlarining bir şekilde foydalanib qilishini umid qilman. Hamma Janob Allohga topshirib, assalomu alaykum va rahmatulloh. Davomini yana shu Erkin Asiya radiosininkidan bo'lsa yoki Facebook, Twitter'lardagi ulab taqib atgan yerlarni ko'rilishini umid qilman qarindoshlarim. Allohga emanet bo'linglar.